ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is DebateSensei IPDA edition, where we talk about things that are relevant to the International Public Debate Association. I have with me my Chief Banter Officer, Tim Seavey. Thank you very much.
What day is today? Today's a big day.
Yeah. So we decided to, this season, try something a little bit new. Not only are we focusing exclusively on IPDA for all of our episodes, but we also decided to incorporate demo debates. What that means is that we're actually going to select a topic, prepare, and do a full debate so you can check it out. All right. We have our topics in. And we will be revealing them one by one as we strike, and then we will reveal the one that we choose for our topic. The sides for this debate is Tim on the affirmative, I'm on the negative, so we're switching sides from the last one. You can go check out our previous debate about the gig economy jobs. But this one, we'll see what our topic is. We will pause the video, and for you as a viewer, yeah, it'll just be right immediately. It will start right after the topic is selected.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. So as the affirmative, you get to go ahead and strike first. Or I'm the affirmative, you're neg, so go ahead and strike first.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see here. I should have had this a little bit more ready. Be an edge. 2. Okay. I guess it's not too bad. Not too bad. Yeah, so let's get rid of, let me see which one. I don't want to give you too much power, too much leeway.
Cool.
Yeah, I think
those really broad value rounds, I honestly don't particularly enjoy on the affirmative or negative, so cool.
Yeah, I should have left it. Since I know you, I know you would have struck that one. Maybe I should have not struck that one. All right, cool.
Strategery.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Then I will strike this guy.
Okay. Oh.
Good topics. These ones came from the PSCFA warm-up tournament, so good topics here. I just don't like moral obligation debates generally.
Okay, I think I have some neg to stay on the others, on the remaining 2. So
cool.
That one just seemed a little boring, is all. The other 2 is a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then I honestly really like both topics. But let's go ahead and do away with this one.
We're striking that one. Okay.
Yeah. So striking death penalty. So our final topic is the United States should implement a universal basic income. UBI. Cool.
All right. I'm going to write this down before we pause.
All right. So go ahead and 30 minutes of prep. We will pause it here. See you right back here in no time.
All right. See you then. All right, we are back. We have prepped on the UBI topic. There's a few observations that we realize how out of practice we are, and how much time it's taking us to find our sources. So just so you know, it's a struggle, kind of getting back into the swing of things. You have to be practiced in debate in order to kind of operate at the highest competitive levels, and we are not there yet. All right.
But that's the whole point of doing these practice debates. It's remembering and showing like, hey, this is the thing. Like, in order to get and stay good at anything, including IPDA, you just have to run more practice.
Yeah. And also, we were just talking about how we're used to NPDA, which has like an additional 2 minutes for each speech. And so we're used to like feeling like we need more. Yeah. Like we have a higher research burden, and we got to get used to what the research burden for IPDA is. And so it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do this.
Ready when you are.
All right. So today we have the resolution, the United States should implement a universal basic income. And as the affirmative, I wanted to take a step back and just talk about a real quick story. Zona Everett was a worker that was originally working with the Department of Defense, living in Stockton, California, and falling below the poverty line in 2022. This was a really tough time for workers, and at that point in time, there was a test pilot program through the city of Stockton to run a universal basic income. It was only $500 a month, and it was randomly given out to only a small select number of citizens in the area, but the idea being that universal basic income really could make an impact. Over the course of 16 months, the amount of time that Everett was receiving these checks, her life fundamentally changed. She went from having to drive Uber Eats to make ends meet. The disability payments that she was receiving from having lost her job and universal basic income bridged the gap to where she was able to pay for the school that she'd gone back to be able to get another degree. She got a job that was outside the area she would normally be able to drive through at a Tesla factory. That was a significant step up. She even was able to leave a problematic marriage that she found herself in. The timing of it was really key, and hers is not a unique case. All around the world, there are a ton of cases of universal basic income really working for people, and that's what we're digging into today. So first, we're going to start with the harms, specifically within the U.S. There, at this moment in time, or according to the most recent census, there are 38 million Americans living at or below the poverty line, 9 million additional children that are at or below the poverty line. According to the University of Washington at St. Louis, every dollar of investment into children at the poverty line saves $7 million. Every dollar invested saves $7 of what would eventually go to that same person over the course of their life in welfare services and the other costs that end up being associated with poverty. Poverty is cyclical, and that breaking that cycle is one of the most difficult things to do. And this is where we have a unique opportunity to do it. So the plan, just a bit of framing also, we're going to measure this round as the criteria this round will be net benefits. So we're keeping this fairly normal, and just based from the resolution, this will be a policy round. So getting to that policy, here is the plan. Congress passed and President will sign a universal basic income bill giving $1,000 per month to every adult citizen in the United States and $500 per month for each child. That does not go to the child, that goes to the parent of those children. So again, $1,000 a month to every adult, $500 for each of their children. Timeline is as soon as possible. Agent of action, agent of enforcement, normal means, Congress and President. The funding will come from the Wall Street speculation tax. This was another thing that was really popular. These plans, you'll recognize. This is essentially Andrew Yang's freedom dividend plan, and the tax is Bernie Sanders' Wall Street speculation tax. This is a tax on stock trades, a fraction of a percent of tax on stock trades. In total, that would raise $2.4 trillion in the next decade. I should also note that the cost in order to actually fund that many people, just to do the math, is $468 billion. There's a delta there. What's the problem? One, it's every dollar saved. Remember, every dollar spent on childhood poverty ends up being $7 saved. So those things are enormous. So that's the funding where we get to it. The solvency is that this would raise 4.8 million people per year are immediately receiving $12,000 a year more, additional for those that are parents, and that is significantly improving their situation, raising them ultimately out of poverty. Advantage number one is uniqueness. We're talking about in the Netherlands, in Brazil, in Spain, and in Stockton, California, as well as nationally in Finland. There have been so many tests of universal basic income that had, from a longitudinal study from McKinsey, the following kind of universal impacts on the people: an increase in employment, more significantly, an increase in physical health, and ultimately a significant increase in overall well-being. So having this basic income, like, certainly that is not going to pay for everything someone needs, but that is the difference between being at or near the poverty line and being able to live in the middle class. So the link is that this would be increasing skills and increasing opportunity. So according to that same University of Washington, St. Louis article, they found that investments into children meant that they were more capable by increasing the skills that they had, which means that they don't have as many costs in the future so things that end up coming to be associated with childhood poverty. There's an increased likelihood of incarceration. There's increased likelihood of a need for public services. Those needs go down when you have instead more money from an earlier age and increased opportunities. The impact is a significantly improved health, employment, and physical well-being of the middle class, and a decrease in poverty for those 48 million people.
Okay. So cross-examination when you're ready.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Hello, Tim. I only got 2 minutes, so I want to jump right into it. You said every citizen is getting this, so all 330 million.
I'm sorry, I should have passed that in there. No, not all 360 million. All people at the poverty line. So that number that I mentioned before, that were 38 million adults, 9 million children. So that is a total of 39 million adults, 9 million children. So 47 million people. So those folks that are at or below the poverty line.
So at or below the poverty line, according to federal
guidelines? The U.S. Census. Yeah, the U.S. Census.
U.S. Census federal poverty stats. And so everyone's getting $1,000 regardless of whether or not they live in California or Mississippi.
Anywhere, correct. Anywhere in the U.S.
Anywhere in the U.S. Now, and
it's $500 for children.
And $500 for children. Okay. And so what's your definition of universal basic income?
Universal being everybody, basic income being the minimum amount in order to survive, live, thrive. That is where we can equivocate that definition of the poverty line, or that's where we come to the conclusion of like the poverty line being a universal income. In many of the tests that were given, it wasn't every single person in the entire country is given this. It is people that meet certain criteria are given a universal basic income.
Okay. So you don't give it to everybody, right? Like there's
everyone that meets the criteria, right?
Everyone that meets the criteria. So where else? And so you're saying in Stockton, they gave out how many of these $500 things did they give out?
It was only a few. I want to say it was like 20,000.
And they called that universal basic income?
They called it a universal basic income test. So theirs were a random selection. So it is possible, yes, in Stockton that someone of very high income could have received this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thanks. All right. 6 minutes. All right, with 6 minutes, the first thing we're going over is topicality, universal basic income. The last thing that Tim said was that the Stockton UBI was a test of UBI, and you know what? So is his plan. It is not a universal basic income. It is a test on whether or not universal basic income would work if we gave it to everybody. So here's first the definition. Universal basic income means there is a one income that is given to every single person, regardless of how much income they get or regardless of their status, their poverty status. Okay, it is the same amount to every single person within a population. The violation is that this plan is not universal. It's only people who qualify. So there are certain people who would qualify for universal basic income, and as soon as they get out of poverty, they no longer qualify for it. So it is a conditional basic income, not a universal basic income. Those are two different things. The standards, first off, framers' intent. The person who wrote this was tapping into the definition of universal basic income, and we're supposed to be doing that. Secondly, ground. This gets him out of a whole lot of disadvantages and counterplan ground, especially the cost of the plan, which is something that I should be allowed to predict. And I can't now because I don't know how much poverty is going to be going on in the future. Third, the literature. All definitions about universal basic income say that one of the critical parts of universal basic income is that it applies universally to everybody within a population. Everything that he pointed to were tests of universal basic income. They weren't programs for universal basic income, and so is his plan. So the impacts. First, topicality is an a priori issue. It is something that you have to deal with first. If you lose on topicality, you lose the entire round. Secondly, on a prima facie basis, his first affirmative needs to be topical. He can't come in later and say, okay, I'll give it to all citizens and I will accept the ramifications for that. But lastly, I would say that the ground that I should be afforded in this round should be extended and not taken from me. Let's move on to the disadvantage. My disadvantage is going to be federalism. First, states uniqueness. States control their safety nets right now, or a large portion of it. There are federal safety net programs, but their states also have these ones as well. And secondly, the cost of living between different states are very different. In California, you would need a UBI of about $1,500 in order to make ends meet, whereas in Mississippi, you would only need about $700. The link, the federal UBI would impose a welfare program universally. Now, I would say that in order to be topical, he has to do it to every single person. But even if he's going to say that, it's like, well, it's only applying to the poor people in certain areas. There would be more people that meet the poverty areas. I'm not going to get into that. All right, the internal link. This will lead to unequal distribution. Places in California and New York who need universal basic income levels of higher than $1,000, which is like a $1,500 in California and $1,200 in New York, won't be enough to make ends meet, whereas in Mississippi, it would be inefficient and too much money. So the impact, first, would be inefficiency. Now, according to my figures, a universal basic income of about $1,500 for everybody, which would be the minimum that for the highest income needs for Californians, would be about $390 billion a month. That would equal $4.6 trillion per year, okay? Not the $460 billion a year that we're talking about in the plan. In context, the budget is $6.4 trillion a year, okay? Secondly, the precedent that this would set would mean that the United States federal government would be able to use this power grab as a way of imposing other sort of federal programs. What's going to happen to Medi-Cal or, at California? It's like, well, we're giving them these programs, and now they would be able to force everybody into like Medicaid and SNAP programs and things like that. And so the amount of autonomy lost within the states would be astronomical. So the counterplan. The 50 states should each implement a targeted basic income program based on their economic and demographic conditions. Now, I think that in order to be universal, that it should apply to all citizens. But if we're modifying this, then the poverty levels in each state could apply in this one and could be modified in the same way. But I think that is just not on the topic of this debate. So solvency. The same solvency that is explains and supports the case supports these basic income state level programs. Okay. So the solvency, let me see what you said, was... So Stockton, California is an example of a test that was happening, but only $500 were uniquely applies to people that were in those particular needs. And there's only like a couple hundred of these things given out, right? So it's not really a test of it's not really a stress test. Okay, wait, where's my counter plan again? All right, the competition. First off, my counter plan is not universal. But also the plan isn't even universal. So nobody here is proposing a universal basic income, but mine is competitively not the same as there. Secondly, this preserves the federalist separation of powers, and so the states can address their constituents' needs. Lastly, the PERM would cost more than twice the amount of the counterplan alone, so that would be a net deficit. That's 6 minutes.
Cool. All right, in these 2 minutes here, jumping right into it. Thank you for all of it. Question, when you're saying that this becomes a federal power grab, you explain a little bit of that to me. So how is it that the federal government is taking powers from the states by offering basic income to people?
Well, there are cash replacement programs in California that would now be suspect in that, because the federal government now says it's like, all right, we have our welfare program. If they want to replace or somehow modify the state-based welfare programs, they now have a precedent in order to do so because they're imposing a welfare program on the states. If they can impose this welfare program, why can't they impose other welfare programs? This is a giant welfare program they're imposing upon states.
Cool. Thank you. And then one other question around topicality. So because we don't typically have a topicality in IPDA, can you just explain to me in general terms why universal basic income has to be every single person?
In order to have predictable debates, words need to have meaning. And universal basic income, all the literature around it, defines universal basic income as an amount of money that is paid to every single person within a population. It does not have any conditions on it. All right. That would be a conditional basic income program. In order to have a predictable debate in any format, IPDA and any format, you need to have some sort of baseline that we start with, and we're not achieving that.
Cool. Totally makes sense. Okay. Lastly, one question just arises on the subject of states. How do you know that every state does it so damn well, right? Like, to accomplish something for all 50 states, they're all going to pass this. Are they all passing the exact same piece of paper? Like, they all pass the same policy? Is that what we're saying?
Well, the plan text clearly states that they're going to pass UBI based on their economic and demographic conditions. One in particular would be their poverty levels are different.
Based on their own. Okay, perfect. Love it. All right. Thank you so much. 3 minutes, yeah?
Yes.
Whew. All right, we're going to be getting through this quick. Order is going to be topicality, counterplan, disad, case, and order. All right. Time starts now. So on the topicality, they said the violation is that UBI has to mean every single person in a population. Just what Jared clarified right there. He says every single person in a population. We have defined that population to be the folks at the poverty line. Universal basic income, those are capitalized terms, whereas we're talking about the standard one of framers' intent. That is a specific policy, and specific policies get to have these specific rules. He's not giving out to every person that is visiting the United States on holiday. He's not giving it out to 10-year-olds. He's defining the specific population of people, I would assume, to be over the age of 18. Those people that are voting U.S. citizens or taxpayers. There already are inherently some parameters that are put on it, and universal basic income is a new invented thing. It is not the dictionary definition of universal. It is a policy that has been posed, and we are getting to say we're posing it to those that are in poverty. We'll actually talk about quick, side note, his counterplan even references those folks because different states have different poverty levels, they get to therefore choose how much different. I get that he's saying that's a point of mutual exclusivity, but the entire idea being that, yes, different states have different needs, or different states have different needs, but they all have their own definition. They don't like just screw the definitions. So to the framers' intent, we can never really know. To the second point of the cost of this is not predictable, I told him exactly how many dollars this would cost. The third of the literature, the fact of it needs to apply to everybody. Universal basic income, we already said, is applying to these particular folks. Policies in the United States always have some kind of parameters, right? It's, felons are exempt from this, or people that are not, registered taxpayers, like those with green cards, right? So there's always going to be limitations that are posted in policy. We're just saying that it's only applying to those people that are at the poverty line. A priori, and the fact that there's no shift in this, again, basically throw out the topicality. We're perfectly predictable. We all end up talking about the poverty line anyways. We're not talking about but what does it do to those people that are above the line? Going to the counterplan, yeah, sure, we're absolutely not going to permit this because this would end up being a terrible idea. So sure, we're going to make this plan versus counterplan in this. This is also a multi-fiat or multi-actor fiat abuse. You can't just say that 50 states are going to do something. 50 states never really do anything, but even when they do it really terribly. So this is why they're competitive. Look at how diverse the difference in education is between, say, Massachusetts and Arkansas. States don't do a very good job of being told, here's what you need to do, and now go implement it. They spend their money in all kinds of different places. Look at abortion policy in a bunch of places around the United States. They're really terrible places, and they're places that are doing it really well. So he doesn't actually really help anybody. He just says, here's more that states are going to do, and in fact, then look to the disadvantage of how this just kicks himself in the shin. The point is, and he gets down to the impact level, that this would really just take autonomy away from the states, because now they already this sets precedent for they can change their policies, or they can change what they're doing with welfare programs. The federal government offering something just means that those people actually get the leg up that they need. Whereas right now, no state welfare program is doing particularly well. The federal government is something that is on top of that. That helps people so much more. Moving on to the case, it was entirely dropped, flow across the entirety of the case, where you have the impacts of a better employment, better physical health, better overall well-being happening in the instance of these tests. And that is exactly what we get to see out of the plan today.
God, the 1AR is just tough, man.
There's just, IPDA is not really built for covering an extensive flow in 3 minutes.
I think we're being a little too NPDA in this. Yeah. I think we have too much NPDA background. We gotta adjust this.
I appreciate it. This is the right way. Okay, counterplan. We got a stick in it. Make sure that there's a double bind on the topicality there. These are all the right pieces in place, but it's just not really time to cover that in a 3-minute 1AR and IPDA.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. 5 minutes? Oh, yep.
Oh wait, what am I doing? Okay.
Yeah, you got 5 minutes.
I was looking for the timer on there. I'm like, oh no, it's right here. My bad. I'm like, what the hell? Okay, here we go. All right. I think the issue of the topic is central here, okay? Because my opponent wants to have his cake and eat it too. What he's proposing is not universal basic income. It is a targeted welfare program. That's all it is, okay? And when he says that UBI is this new idea, no, it's not. People have been talking about universal basic income for decades, and they've been testing universal basic income, but they haven't been implementing universal basic income. By his definition, all the tests were universal basic income programs, but that's not what anyone else called them, all right? The history of the literature of universal basic income has always been that you choose a population of people and you give everyone in that population the same amount of money. Now, he responds to this and saying, he's like, yes, all the poor people. It's like, that population is ill-defined, right? That is conditional. That is a condition based upon a status within a population, all right? Everyone within the population should be getting the same one. That is a targeted welfare program. We already have that. You have to qualify first. You have to actually apply for it. Like, how is somebody going to get this UBI, right? They have to prove that they are poor, and then they will get it. A universal basic income should be given to people without any application necessary. All right. So there is an implied application that is absolutely necessary in order for his plan to work, but that is what, by definition, makes it not universal. All right. The government isn't going to just identify all the poor people and just say, hey, here you go. You have to actually qualify for it. And a qualification process is not part of UBI. If there is any qualification process, it is not universal basic income. He implemented some sort of qualification process. That's it. So he also wants to say that policies always have limits. But that completely contradicts what he said, where UBI is this new idea. It's like, okay, so which is it? Is UBI a new idea that doesn't have these limits, or is it something that's been defined for decades? All right. So you can't have both of these answers and have a consistent narrative. Ultimately, my argument impacts out to the point that this is the most important issue in the round. You have to understand what UBI is in order to evaluate its net benefits. And we have not done that in this round. We have no evaluation on whether or not UBI is good or bad, because he is looking at a targeted welfare program, which might be good. It might be good, but it doesn't prove whether or not UBI should be implemented in the United States. My counter plan also answers this, though. Okay, the counter plan, it basically does the welfare program that he's implementing, but on a state level. And the reason because that we want to do that is, first, I pointed out that California needs more than his plan offers. And this was not responded to, right? That the cost under my disadvantage, the uniqueness, said that California, if they were going to implement a universal basic income, they would need to be at least $1,500 in order to cover people's basic needs. Not responded to, right? And not only that, but it would give more money than is necessary to people like in Mississippi, and that would be inefficient and lead to cost problems, right? So the counter plan takes this into account. Now, if you want to say it's like, oh, well, I'm only targeting the poor people. It's like, well, I guess my counter plan could do that too. I think that's not in the spirit of this resolution. But if you're going to grant him that leeway, then I should be given the same amount of leeway. And I still get the cost savings that are associated with it, as well as the targeted welfare programs that are necessary for people like in California. Remember, his plan does not solve for the people in California. He does not get his solvency for in those particular areas, while he might get it in other states because they are getting adequate amount of funding. The counter plan is the only plan that is flexible enough to meet the demands of individual states. Ultimately, if you want to understand whether or not universal basic income is a good idea, you first have to interrogate universal basic income as it is defined. And we have not done that in this round. We've had a good debate about whether or not welfare, just like cash payments to people in general, is a good idea if they are poor. That is not what universal basic income is. You can't vote for the affirmative.
All right. 3 minutes here. Let's wrap it up here. So I think Jared misses kind of an important piece and then almost like contradicts himself. I get the idea behind like universal basic income, as some other people have theorized before, would be this, that, and the other. What we're talking about, like we have defined this population as those at the poverty line. He says, well, that's not a population. That's a subset within a population. It has to be given to absolutely everybody. Everybody needs to get this with zero qualification, with zero filtering. And there's really like no way to, like, there shouldn't ever be an application for it. I pose right back to him, though, that is physically impossible. The way that any amount of money is still going to be giving out is, are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a taxpayer over the age of 18? Are you not a felon? There are inherently qualifications around any kind of policy that ever gives out money. Unless Jared's counterplan and his idea of universal basic income is, I don't know, the post office has a pile of checks that you just go pick up because they're free and available to absolutely everybody. He's exploding the idea of universal to be something that is so big that it is impossible to ever have a policy around that. There have to be limits. There have to be definitions around this is who actually gets the money. Otherwise, we're just implied like, well, obviously only people over 18 and obviously not people that are, outside of this, or obviously people that are not, U.S. citizens. Like, right, we already have these parameters that are around the understanding of universal. I am applying them to say that the population, it has to be given to an entire population. We're giving it to the entire population of those folks that are impoverished. We're making this definition. The census already defines these are the people that are at this level. The federal government already knows who those people are. They're the one that get the checks. There's not an application process. It is those folks that are already at this level that are getting them. So I think this is just an exploded, like, wishful understanding of universal being absolutely everybody. But that's not exactly what we did. Sorry, that's like how debate functions sometimes. And we defined it really well and laid all that out. So it was very predictable in the plain text. Caveat that and in just a moment. But looking over the counter plan, so this seems to be where the level of competition comes down to. Like, states can do a better job. He does point out, like, yep, California and New York are more expensive places to live than Mississippi. Totally fair. Well, look back to my point, though, that states do a really terrible job of implementing things on their own. As he even points out in his disadvantage, they've already got welfare programs in these places, right? But then we're supposed to now just like have the states pass more. I get that that's a new answer. So I'm not going to say that like, oh, they can't afford to do both or whatever. What I'm instead saying, though, is that states already do a terrible job of it. And now he's having the counter plan say, and now the states are going to implement universal basic income, right? Like something on top of what we've already said sucks. If the states already were good at it, then the people would already be out of poverty, but they're not. So you come down to the level of the federal government doing this, where everybody at the certain level gets it. Sure, some people in Mississippi are going to get too much, but we're saying that that's still better. The cost of living, or the quality of life, the physical health, and the well-being of everybody at the poverty level is improved by the federal government passing this. Vote for the plan.
All right.
That was so not topical. Holy shit, I'm so sorry. Halfway through, I'm like, yep, totally changed that. That was what I originally wrote down as my plan text, and then got halfway through and got to the cost step. And I realized like all of the research around like how we raise various points of money never equaled the amount of the entire population. Like Bernie Sanders' plan or like Andrew Yang's plan, like all those things raised a huge amount of money, but never even close to like the total amount of money it would cost for everybody. I was like, okay, cool. We're just going to do it for this group. Yeah. And I didn't have a coach in the back of the room or a partner to be like, yeah, that's not topical. That's why it's rough, right? Like that's, you gotta, you're relying entirely on yourself and don't have someone backing you up.
Like if I had to do over again, like that plan opens up. Okay, so universal basic income doesn't really have a fraud problem because everybody gets it, right? It's like you can't, but your plan might open up fraud problems. People would,
for sure.
You know what I mean? And so that might be, that's an interesting way of kind of exposing what my argument was, but. At the same time,
you also feel like a lack of mobility issue where it's like, okay, the second you become $1 over the poverty line, you no longer get this benefit. Just means people need to get to the level and get bumped back down over and over. And that's why those policies suck. I was trying to find like, Census Bureau data they have like approaching poverty. It's like food insecurity. There's definitions that are like food almost insecure or like food scarce. That it's not the same thing as like, totally food insecure. I was trying to find something like that for poverty just to have a little bit higher bar there. But once again, that's still not universal.
And those are good though about like questioning like what counts as a population. I'm like, man, I'm not really explaining this as well as I could. I'm sure if I had a second chance at it, I might be a little clearer. But yeah,
I think the like randomness. I think you interrogated like, okay, every instance that I mentioned, right, or like Finland and Brazil and Stockton, all these things was still randomized. So you had people probably that were like middle or upper middle class that were receiving these payments. And they were part of the data, part of the study. So therefore, like, their quality of life and shit is, so that's the problem with it. Like, I love the topic of universal basic income. I think I enjoy it being like an LD topic or something where you can get really into literature and like spend a lot of time, because it's tough to have a lot of like good literature from the hip. I feel like you can get a bunch of good talking points, but I think as soon as you start getting into like these, detailed responses, it helps if you are able to go really deep on it. I think that it's like, really worthy of having some like well-prepped cases or run like multiple practice rounds on it. So you can kind of refine the stats you're using in the cases you're running.
Yeah. The IPDA debates on a topic like this just sound different. And I don't think we sounded different enough to like meet the sort of like, IPDA expectations. It needs to, I don't know.
Yeah. Econ rounds in IPDA, I think, are fairly infrequent anyways.
Yeah.
Like, to get really into like, okay, even just I was still at the top of case, didn't do a good job of laying out the top of case, and that took a full minute. Like to just give like, here's a little bit of background, here's the problem, and then here's the details of like how an economic policy is instituted. And I didn't even mention like the specifics of like how the taxes and things are imposed. And even still, you just run out of time quickly. So I think like the framing required to really execute a decent economic policy takes time that IPDA is not exactly built for. So I almost wonder like if, like the ways that a policy round is run in IPDA ought to be done differently.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like just debating about the principles behind the policies rather than I think that's what a lot of people are kind of get pissed off about a little bit about IPDA is that's what it does is like, you have to kind of like, step back and have these sort of, like generic principled, debates about this. Like, so like the principle of the universal basic income, not necessarily the, implementation.
But I think it's just like having too much NPDA background. Like, okay, I know he's going to say this is a problem. So here, like, let me find some front lines for this particular thing. Or like, here's what I can already expect is going to be an issue with this plan. So let me preempt that. And that there's just not as much space for that in IPDA. It feels like there's not physically as much time. Because also, like, you want to go at a reasonable conversational pace. And I think to cover that amount of flow, it just makes that tricky.
Yeah, I was definitely going quick. I was doing like not my. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Like, I think the strategy I went for, I'm like the whole. I'm like, my thought was, I want to kind of show viewers the federalism counterplan disadvantage thing. I thought this will be a good one to do that on. You know what I mean? And so it was more like. Not necessarily the strategy I would always go. I might go for it on UBI. That's not a bad strategy at all. But it was more like, this would be a good illustration of how you can apply this here. And then I don't know. It wasn't my. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of my performance. So.
Well, same. I wrote a completely non-topical plan for a very straightforward resolution there. But I mean, hey, this is the thing. Like, practice debates are what point out where you're missing some things. And I think it's important for everybody, including coaches, to get some chances to practice, to be in the shoes, and you get better by doing more of it.
All right. Anybody's watching this, let us know what you think. All right. We will be back and talk about other IPDA related topics in the future. Thank you much.
Thank you.